Hi. So, I was walking through the local shopping centre yesterday with my friend. We'd been to the cinema, and there's a TV screen in the local shopping centre. The news was on, and it said that the government had approved the deal to accept Huawei's contract, have access to Britain's mobile phone technology, and be the provider for 5G. My heart sank. This is what I did not want to see, and I know many people out there will be very wary of this. It will further cause tensions in our relations with the United States. I'll come to that in a second. This is how the Eye has covered the story today, the Eye newspaper. No copyright infringement intended. Intended. This is the Eye. So that's a kind of lotus type symbol of the Huawei. Okay, this is quite a long background to this with the daughter of the Huawei CEO being arrested in Vancouver and the whole extradition issue there, which caused significant tensions between Washington and Beijing, which haven't been resolved, um, and also significant tensions between Ottawa and Beijing because the arrest was made in Canada. Just a quick word about that. Compare the way that she was treated, Meng Hongzhou, I believe her name was. I'm just a spontaneous video. Compare the way she was treated, where she was given full freedom of the city of Vancouver. She wasn't made given any sort of inhumane treatment. She was treated in a very civil way. Compare that to the way the free Canadian nationals have been treated in China. That shows the difference between East and West, or certainly between Canada and China. Um, I have to be honest, the way I see this is a surrender of our sovereignty. It just feels like it is yet another kind of brick that we are putting in the path towards subservience to China. Now, there is a caveat with this, two caveats. Firstly, Boris Johnson has said that there's no credible alternative. I'll come to that in a second. The second issue is that apparently this will not be for the core technology, um, which is supposedly the sensitive part. Now, I am not an expert on digital technology, so I'm not in a position to, I'm speaking in layman's terms here from what I've seen in the press. But here's my contention. Huawei can give all the assurances at once, and I know their spokespeople have done so. They've said they would never hand over secretive information. They're not spies. They're not going to give anything to the Chinese government. Well, they can say that in English to the British because they want the contract. In the end of the day, they're a business. They want to do business, but they're also a Chinese business, which means that ultimately they have to answer to the Communist Party. That's the way it works in China. In China, the CCP has absolute power in every aspect of life, every field, technology, military, you name it. So even if we play the devil's advocate for a second and say, okay, well, Huawei really does have honest intentions. They're just doing business. They just want the contract. And they don't really, they're not interested in espionage. I don't really believe that, by the way, but let's just say that is the position. It wouldn't matter because they are legally obliged, probably by the Chinese constitution, to give over information if the Chinese government asks for it. If the Chinese government sees them as a useful asset, say, for example, the situation escalates between Britain and China over the Hong Kong situation, or goodness knows what else. We're probably having to work with Beijing at the moment over this coronavirus epidemic, but you know, let's not delude ourselves. China is not an ally. It's a rival. It's a competitor. And in my view, it's a government that really cannot be trusted. But we have to work with them on some level. So if we're going to, we have to do it sensibly. Now, this idea that the government has no other choice, well, apparently GCHQ has said that it's disgraceful or it's a shocking fact that there is only, as the I put it, tech director at GCHQ says the market was broken and it was crazy that Huawei was only one of three suppliers. So it may well be that there is a side to this that people like myself, China critics, China government critics, are perhaps underestimating, perhaps that to be fair to the government, they really did have their hands tied, that there was no other way but to accept some some degree of contract with Huawei. But the timing of it has to be questioned. I mean, we're 2 days before Brexit, 2 days, and it just feels like this is kind of an act of, well, we have to do the deal with the Chinese. We have to, we have to rely on the world's second biggest economy in order to shore up trade deals post Brexit. That's what it feels like. And if that is the case, that is just very depressing because so much for taking back control, it would be a humiliating surrender of control, actually. Um, I mean, okay, the government can say that it isn't going to be the core aspect of this technology, but I imagine that the Chinese have the means, the intelligence to override that sort of those sort of restrictions. I mean, this is a small country. Geographically, we're a small country. I can't imagine it is that difficult to infiltrate away from the non-core into the core. And I'm no expert. I should, stress that I am no expert. I could be completely ignorant about that, like how easy it is from going to the non-core, which has been the agreement, to the core, which is sensitive information, military sites and so on. But it just seems like a huge gamble. And if in the near future we do experience a major espionage incident akin to the Salisbury attack, I don't think the Chinese would use nerve agents or anything like that, but I do think they would be capable of a major cyber attack. Then I think it could be traced back to this. So it really doesn't matter what Huawei says because, they have to say that. They want the deal. They wanted the deal. I don't trust them. They have to answer to the Chinese Communist Party ultimately. And the Chinese regime, as for them saying, oh, we'll never use this information for espionage. Come on. Come on. Are they really so? Are they really going to believe that we're that stupid? Well, this is the thing. Right now, they might actually think, yeah, the British are an easy target. They'll agree to anything. Um, my question would be, okay, Johnson is saying there was no other choice because there's only these other free suppliers. There's only free suppliers in the market. My question is the 5G technology really, really worth the price of national security? What's the major benefit of this? I'll be totally honest, I'm ignorant when it comes to smartphones. Okay, my own smartphone is a pretty basic model. It's an LG model, it's secondhand. I am fairly ignorant about this. Hands up, I'm ignorant about what the benefits could be. But let me just say that this, if let's say there are wonderful benefits, let's say the technology is much faster, let's say it's very efficient, is that worth the price of it potentially being a security risk? I don't know that it is. It just feels like we're selling our soul for trade. Now, it goes without saying that this has upset the Trump administration and will sour our relations with Washington. Mike Pompeo is visiting the country this week. It is interesting though. There's apparently we only informed Washington and the Trump administration after this was made public, after Number 10 made it public that we were agreeing to sign up to this technology. So I wonder is that kind of a bit of a rebuke for the fact that Trump, and this is pure speculation on my part, Trump ordered a strike against Qasem Soleimani and not and didn't tell the British until afterwards. I wonder is it kind of a way of us saying, well, two can play that game. If you're not going to give us important information, we're not going to give you important information until afterwards. If that is the case, if it's becoming now trying to point score with the United States, which let's face it is a more powerful country than the United Kingdom, that is not a good situation. But there's other things going on, of course, with Washington. I mean, the Harry Dunn case. Apparently, Dominic Raab was incandescent with rage, not just as foreign secretary, but from a human perspective, he's the father, over the Americans' refusal to extradite and to cool it. And I am pleased the government's taken a robust line on that because just I've said this before, just because we're allied with the United States, just because they're a partner, just because of the special relationship, doesn't mean that we should tolerate double standards. And I still believe that had that been in reverse, had a British diplomat or their spouse killed an American teenager in rural Virginia, there is no way that we could easily, that that person would be able to come back here so easily, that they would just be allowed out of the country on diplomatic immunity. I think the Americans would take a pretty hard line. So one does get the impression this is not a level playing field. I mean, it's not equal in terms of obviously the United States is a more powerful country. But it's almost, frankly, I hate to say this, but it almost sounds like we're being squeezed between two superpowers right now. And it's not that Britain is a small, insignificant country. We are a great power, but we're not China and we're not the United States at this time. So it feels like we're kind of a political football. Obviously, ideologically, we're much closer to the United States. Five Eyes, democracies, Western liberty, etc. But in terms of trade, in terms of diplomacy, right now, it does feel like we're being wedged between two superpowers. And that's not a good situation. We need to show that we can stand up to both. It's not that I think that that the United States is a threat in the way that China is. I certainly don't see the US as a threat. But I do think America could be very arrogant, particularly under this president. And I do think we need to say that, look, we're friends, we're allies, but we're not going to be pushed around. And that should apply to any country that we are allies with. We need to show that taking back control really means that we are proud. We're a proud country that will not be pushed around by anyone. The Chinese are going to be happy about this. And my concern is, are we rewarding an authoritarian, dishonest regime? Then again, one could look at, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. If we look at the spread of coronavirus, the Chinese government, the last thing they will want is to be red-faced, i.e., that this could be a lot worse than they're letting on. The fact they were building a hospital very quickly in Wuhan, they might think this has got no relation to the main subject I'm talking about in this video, but if we look at the issue of power dynamics, it may well be that China actually relies on us as well on some level, because other countries could very well choose to isolate China and say, well, it was their eating practices that caused this, and it was. That's what's been traced to. It's demand for exotic food in the Wuhan market. So it could well be that a Chinese contact of mine actually sent a message earlier saying that the Chinese people are being blamed. I don't think that's quite accurate, and I told her so, but I do think that there is a power dynamic at play on some level here. The last thing China wants is to lose face. So they will be looking to reassure the rest of the world. So we can actually afford some leeway, maybe. Okay, we've taken this Huawei deal. Now, in return, we should say to the Chinese, not just a security issue around Huawei, but we will assist them um, in whatever way necessary in terms of dealing with this situation. Um, So I do think there's areas we can work with China. As much as I don't trust the Chinese government, as much as I feel we should keep a cool distance, as much as I feel that there is many grounds to scrutinize China on, where we can work with them, it would be foolish not to because they are the world's second biggest economy. But it comes down to power play in the end of the day. And for the Chinese government to say that they will never try to never try to spy on Britain. It's almost nonsensical. I mean, they must be laughing when they say that. It's just ridiculous. No government can make that assurance. I mean, Britain, I'm sure we're involved in espionage. All countries do it, particularly G20 members. I mean, it's just the nature of geopolitics, national security, power play. So for the Chinese government to say, "Oh, we promise we're not going to spy on you," it's almost laughable. That doesn't mean they're going to go for a Russia-style Salisbury attack. I think the Chinese are a little bit more subtle than the Kremlin is in terms of they're less how can I put it? If you look at CGTN and if you look at the English version of Chinese propaganda, it's less outspoken than English language Russian propaganda. They're a bit more subtle about it, but I believe it's there, and I believe that time will tell. It may be that a lot of these fears are exaggerated. It may be that Huawei is going to play it clean, although that is a push. I have my concerns, but the decision's been made now, and if something happens, then it'll come back to this decision and the recklessness of Boris Johnson in doing so, and in Dominic Raab and in the rest of the cabinet who's agreed to this. Um, I know there are many Tory backbenchers that are not happy with this. Labour people, there's going to be a lot of people in the country that are thinking Johnson has just sold us out to the Chinese, and they could be forgiven for thinking so. If his hands really were tied, I still think, well, we need to scrutinise it very closely, and there needs to be some sort of stipulation on Huawei that any breach, even an inkling of a breach, then the contract will immediately be torn up and they will be unceremoniously dismissed from operating in this country. That's all we can do at this point. I just hope that as a country, in the months and years ahead, we really do show that we are not a diminished power, that we really do show that we are capable of standing up to the most powerful countries in the world, namely China, Russia, and yes, the United States when need be. I'm not putting America, by the way, on the same moral equilibrium as China and Russia. The United States is an ally, and I don't think they pose an existential threat, not at all. But it's also about respect, and I don't think America's always been entirely respectful. Of course, Trump will say he loves Britain and the Queen's great, etc. But it's also in other aspects of it, not least this Harry Dunn situation. I mean, at the very least, I think the Americans should make some sort of compromise as a goodwill gesture and say, okay, we're going to punish her in the United States. We'll strip her driving license, something like that. But from a British perspective, Anne Secoulis is getting away scot-free for killing a young man due to her reckless driving. That cannot be right. It's no better than a hit and run. And as for Huawei, the Chinese will be happy about this, but we need to make it clear that does not mean we are going to bend over and do everything they ask for. I mean, there is another aspect, and I'll close with this. In China, Facebook is banned, YouTube is banned, Google is banned. So if it's all right for China to ban Western companies, we need to say to the Chinese, by which I mean the Chinese government, okay, you can ban these companies. Why should we give the green light to your companies? Unfortunately, we have just given the green light, and that's how Beijing will read it. So I do think it's a responsibility now for the government that they have agreed to this to be very, very assertive in scrutinizing it as the contract goes ahead. And the tiniest breach, we need to come down hard. So it's a concerning situation. We'll see how things play out.